Okay, let's start with a wild thought. Imagine someone who could see the future, who could diagnose any illness with pinpoint accuracy. Now get this. What if I told you he did all of it while he was completely asleep? Yeah, today we are diving into the absolutely bizarre and fascinating mystery of Edgar Cayce, a man they called the Sleeping Prophet. And really, this is the absolute heart of the Edgar Cayce puzzle. The story goes that while he was in this deep, deep trance, he could tap into information that, well, he just shouldn't have been able to know. I mean, the guy had zero medical training, none. Yet he could diagnose illnesses and even tell people how to treat them with just stunning accuracy. So the big question is, how on earth was he doing it? What's so fascinating about all this is that Cayce wasn't, born this way. He wasn't some special kid. Before 1910, he was just a regular guy, living a totally normal life. But then something just changed. All of a sudden, he started going into these self-induced trances, this really deep sleep state. And from there, he said he could answer any question you threw at him. So it's what was going on during these trances that really kicks off the first big part of this whole mystery. And let's be clear, this wasn't just like sleepwalking or talking in his sleep. No, this was something else entirely. People started calling him the unconscious doctor, and you're about to see why. So while he was in this state, he started diagnosing other people's illnesses. And the process itself was just methodical. Cayce would lie down, go into his trance, and then someone, usually his wife, would just say the name and location of the person who needed help. And get this, the person didn't even have to be in the same room. They could be miles away. And then Cayce would start talking in this perfectly clear voice, giving this incredibly detailed medical diagnosis, almost like he was reading it out of some textbook. I mean, think about the paradox here. It's wild. On one hand, you've got doctors, right? They're awake, they're using years and years of training and hard-earned medical knowledge. Then, on the other hand, you have Edgar Cayce, a guy with no medical training, who's fast asleep and somehow accessing this huge library of information in his head. You just couldn't get more opposite. And this is the part that blows my mind. This is the crucial point. It wasn't just a bunch of talk. The medical community was totally baffled. Why? Because the treatments he prescribed, things like special diets, weird little adjustments, herbal stuff, they actually worked. People were getting better based on the advice of a man who was, for all intents and purposes, completely unconscious. Okay, but his abilities, they didn't just stop at medicine. Oh no. Pretty soon, what he was talking about in these readings started to expand. He went from looking at the human body to looking at the entire timeline of human history. And that's where we get to his most famous and, most controversial claims. But here's the most startling part, right? He also saw the future. I mean, as if diagnosing illnesses while you're asleep wasn't strange enough, the information that was coming through him started to change. He began making these wild predictions about the future. He wasn't just peering inside a person's body anymore. He was looking at the whole sweep of history, of global events. And we're not talking about some vague Nostradamus-style prophecies here, no way. The actual transcripts of his readings, they called them life readings. They contain predictions about huge global events, things like major economic crashes. He supposedly foresaw the start and end of both world wars, and even things like future earthquakes and massive geological shifts. So, all of this brings us to the final, and honestly probably the deepest question in the whole Edgar Cayce story. If he was totally asleep, if he had zero conscious knowledge about medicine or world events, then who or what was actually in control? I mean, who was really doing all of this? There was a voice, right? A consciousness speaking through him that had access to all this unbelievable information. But here's the kicker. When Cayce woke up, he couldn't remember a single thing, not one word. So, was it really him talking? And maybe the most chilling part of all comes from the man himself. When he was awake, he'd read the transcripts of what he'd said while he was asleep, and his own words were, "I am seeing all of this, but I am not in control myself." Think about that. He described the feeling like he was just a passenger in his own body, just watching something else take the wheel. So that's the ultimate mystery, isn't it? Was it a gift? Or was something else speaking through him? Was Edgar Cayce just a man with some miraculous, unexplainable psychic power? Or was he simply a channel, a kind of telephone line for some other unknown intelligence to speak through? We still don't know. And that answer, well, it's still one of history's greatest unsolved puzzles.